The wind carried more than dust through Santa Esperanza that September morning in 1874. It carried the stench of desperation, the metallic taste of spilled blood from last night's saloon brawl, and the acrid smoke from cheap tobacco that clung to every surface in this God-forsaken corner of New Mexico territory. Clara May Donovan pressed her face against the warped glass window of her father's cabin, watching tumbleweeds dance across the main street like drunken ghosts. At 22, she'd grown accustomed to the sight of men stumbling from Crane's Paradise, the grandest saloon and gambling house between here and Albuquerque. But today felt different. Today, her father had that look in his eyes again, the same wild, cornered animal look he'd worn the day he'd sold their last milk cow for poker chips. "Clara, girl, come away from that window," Ezra Donovan's voice rasped from behind her. The drought had taken more than their crops. It had stripped away the last vestiges of the man who'd once read her Bible stories by candlelight. She turned to find him slumped at their rickety table, a half-empty bottle of rot-gut whiskey serving as his breakfast companion. His hands trembled as he poured another shot, and Clara noticed the fresh bruises on his knuckles, evidence of another failed attempt to win back their fortunes at Silas Crane's tables. "Papa, you promised you wouldn't go back there," she said softly, moving to clear away the empty bottles that littered the table like fallen soldiers. "Promises?" He laughed, a bitter sound that caught in his throat. "Promises don't put food on the table, girl. Promises don't keep the bank from taking what little we got left." Clara bit back her response. She'd learned that arguing with him when the whiskey had hold was like trying to reason with a dust devil, pointless and exhausting. Instead, she busied herself with the meager breakfast preparations, stretching their last bit of cornmeal into something resembling porridge. The knock at the door came like a gunshot in the morning quiet. 3 sharp raps that seemed to echo with authority and menace. Ezra's face went pale beneath his weathered tan. "Don't answer it," he whispered. But Clara was already moving toward the door, her mother's stubborn streak flaring to life. "We can't hide from our problems forever. Papa." She lifted the latch to find Silas Crane himself standing on their threshold, flanked by 2 of his men. Crane cut an imposing figure in his black suit and string tie, looking more like an undertaker than a saloon owner. His smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Miss Donovan." He tipped his hat with mock courtesy. "Always a pleasure. Might I have a word with your father?" "Mr. Crane." Clara kept her voice steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm afraid my father is indisposed this morning." "Oh, I think he'll want to hear what I have to say." Crane pushed past her as if she were no more substantial than smoke. His men followed, their spurs jangling ominously against the wooden floor. Ezra tried to stand but stumbled, catching himself on the table's edge. "Crane, I just need more time. The rains will come. And then—" "The rains?" Crane's laughter filled the small cabin. "Ezra, you've been singing that song for 2 years now. Time's up. You owe me $800, and I aim to collect." "800? Clara gasped. "Papa, you said it was only 200. Her father couldn't meet her eyes. "Interest, Clara, it accumulates." "Indeed it does," Crane agreed, pulling out a leather-bound ledger. "However, I'm a reasonable man. I've come to offer you a solution to your predicament." The way he said solution made Clara's skin crawl. She moved closer to her father, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "What kind of solution?" Ezra asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected the answer. Crane's gaze shifted to Clara, and she felt naked under his appraisal. "Your daughter is of marriageable age. Pretty enough, strong, good birthing hips. There's a man willing to pay off your debt in exchange for her hand." The words hung in the air like a noose. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "No." The word escaped her lips before she could stop it. "Absolutely not. I'm not cattle to be sold at auction." "Clara, be quiet," her father hissed. But she saw the war in his eyes, desperation battling whatever shred of paternal protection remained. "Who?" Ezra asked finally. "Who wants her?" Crane's smile widened. "Jonas Blackthorne." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Even Crane's men shifted uncomfortably at the name. Jonas Blackthorne Blackiron. They called him, a legend whispered in saloons and around campfires. A man who'd supposedly killed 20 men before his 30th birthday. A ghost who lived somewhere in the mountains, emerging only when he needed supplies or when someone was foolish enough to cross him. "You're mad," Clara breathed. "Jonas Blackthorne is a killer. A monster." "Perhaps," Crane conceded. "But he's a monster willing to pay $800 for a wife. Cash on the barrelhead, today." "Papa, no." Clara gripped her father's arm. "You can't. I'd rather die than—" "You'd rather die," Ezra yanked away from her, whiskey and desperation making him cruel. "What about me? What about what I'd rather? You think I want to lose this land, everything your mother and I built. Mama would never. Your mama's dead." The words exploded from him like bullets. "She's been dead 3 years, and all I got left is dust and debt and a daughter too proud to help her own father." The slap of his words stung worse than any physical blow. Clara stumbled back, tears burning her eyes. "I'll give you an hour to decide," Crane said, clearly savoring the family drama. "After that, I'll be forced to take more direct action to collect what's owed." The threat in his words was unmistakable. Clara had heard stories of what happened to families who couldn't pay Silas Crane. Burned homes, mysteriously poisoned wells, men found face down in arroyos with bullets in their backs. After Crane and his men left, the cabin felt even smaller than before. Ezra slumped in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 53 years. "I'm sorry, Clara," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, but I don't see another way." Clara stood at the window again, watching dust devils dance in the distance. Her reflection stared back, brown hair pinned severely back, gray eyes that her mother used to say held storms, a face that might be called handsome rather than pretty. Was this all she was worth? $800 to clear a gambling debt? "What if he kills me?" she asked quietly. "He won't." Her father's voice held a certainty she didn't feel. "Man doesn't pay that kind of money just to waste it. He wants a wife, not a corpse. And what kind of wife would I be, sold like livestock, given to a man I've never met, a man whose hands are stained with blood?" Ezra had no answer for that. The hour passed like a death march. Clara packed her few belongings, her mother's Bible, 2 dresses, a photograph of her parents on their wedding day, a small sewing kit. Her hands shook as she folded her mother's quilt, the one with the wedding ring pattern that had covered her bed since childhood. When Crane returned, he brought Jonas Blackthorne with him. Clara had expected a monster. What she saw was a man who moved like a mountain cat, all controlled power and coiled tension. He stood well over 6 feet, with shoulders that filled the doorframe and hands that looked capable of both gentleness and terrible violence. His face was weathered but not old, maybe 35, with a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. But it was his eyes that held her gray like her own, but darker, like storm clouds heavy with rain. He studied her with the same intensity she imagined he used to size up opponents before a gunfight. When he finally spoke, his voice was deeper than the desert canyons. "You, Clara Donovan." She lifted her chin. "I am, and you're the man who thinks he can buy me like a horse at market." Something flickered in those storm-gray eyes, surprise, perhaps, or even approval. "I'm the man paying your father's debts," he corrected. "What you make of that is your business." "My business," she laughed bitterly. "How generous of you to leave me that illusion." Jonas turned to Ezra. "Your daughter always this sharp-tongued?" "She's spirited," Ezra admitted, not quite meeting anyone's eyes. "Like her mother was." "Good." Jonas pulled out a leather pouch, heavy with coin. "Weak women don't last long in the mountains." He counted out the money with deliberate precision, stacking gold eagles on the table until they gleamed like a small fortune, which, Clara supposed, they were $800, the price of her freedom, or the cost of her slavery, depending on how you looked at it. "It's done then," Crane said, scooping up the money with the practiced ease of a man used to handling others' misfortunes. "Congratulations on your nuptials." "Wait," Clara said. "Don't I even get a ceremony? A minister anything?" "Already took care of that," Jonas said, producing a paper from his coat. "Judge Martinez signed it this morning, legal and binding." She stared at the marriage certificate, her name written in flowing script next to his blocky letters. Clara May Blackthorne. Just like that, with a stranger's signature. She'd become someone else entirely. "Get your things," Jonas said, not unkindly. "We leave in 10 minutes. Want to make Shepherd's Rock by nightfall." Clara looked at her father one last time. Ezra Donovan sat at his table, staring at the spot where the gold had been, looking like a man who just sold his soul and was only now calculating the price. "Goodbye, Papa," she said softly. He didn't answer. Perhaps he couldn't. Clara followed Jonas Blackthorne out into the harsh New Mexico sun, leaving behind everything she'd ever known. As they walked toward his horse, a massive black stallion that looked as dangerous as its owner, she heard her father finally speak. "God forgive me," he whispered to the empty cabin. But Clara didn't turn back. She'd been sold, traded like commodity, but she'd be damned if she'd give any of them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Instead, she climbed onto the horse behind Jonas Blackthorne, her arms reluctantly circling his waist, and rode away from Santa Esperanza without looking back. The last thing she heard was Silas Crane's laughter drifting on the wind, mixing with the dust and desperation that seemed to coat everything in this unforgiving land. As they rode toward the mountains, toward whatever fate awaited her as Mrs. Jonas Blackthorne, Clara made herself a promise. She might have been sold, but she would not be owned. Whatever this dangerous man wanted from her, whatever price he thought he'd paid for her compliance, he would learn that Clara May Donovan, Clara May Blackthorne, now was worth far more than $800. The sun climbed higher, baking the desert floor until the air shimmered like water, and somewhere in those shimmers, Clara thought she could see her mother's face, strong and proud and unbroken. "Be stronger than the storm, my girl," her mother used to say. Clara straightened her spine, tightened her grip on the dangerous man she'd been bound to, and rode toward the mountains where storms were born. The sun had climbed to its merciless peak when Jonas finally spoke, his first words in over an hour of riding. "There's water ahead. We'll rest the horse." Clara's throat was too parched to respond. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by scattered mesas and the occasional skeleton of a long-dead saguaro. She'd never been this far from Santa Esperanza, never ventured beyond the familiar landmarks of home. Now, with each hoofbeat, she traveled deeper into the unknown, bound to a man whose reputation preceded him like a dark cloud. They stopped at a cluster of rocks where a small spring bubbled up from the earth, a minor miracle in this dried-out land. Jonas dismounted with fluid grace, then turned to help her down. Clara ignored his outstretched hand, sliding off the horse on her own, though her legs nearly buckled when they hit the ground. "Stubborn," he muttered, but there was no anger in it. If anything, he sounded almost amused. Clara knelt by the spring, cupping the cool water in her hands, trying not to think about how his eyes tracked her every movement. When she'd drunk her fill, she found him watching her with that same intense focus that made her feel like a book he was trying to read. "You planning to stare at me the whole journey?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "Just making sure you don't run." He filled his canteen. "Movements, economical and precise. Desert's killed more folks than bullets out here." "And where would I run to?" Clara gestured at the empty horizon. Back to a father who sold me to a town where Silas Crane owns everything and everyone. Smart girl. He took a long drink, then offered her the canteen. Most would have tried anyway. She accepted the water, their fingers brushing briefly. His hands were calloused, but cleaner than she'd expected, with a thin white scar across his knuckles. "Is that how you got your reputation?" she asked. "Hunting down runners." "Among other things." He didn't elaborate, instead pulling out a wrapped bundle from his saddlebags. "Eat. Long way yet." The food was simple dried beef, hard biscuit, a wrinkled apple, but Clara devoured it gratefully. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite. Jonas ate more slowly, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. "You expecting trouble?" she asked. "Always." He paused, considering. "Man in my line of work makes enemies. Some might see you as a way to get to me." "Your line of work?" Clara laughed bitterly. "You mean killing people?" "Used to." He met her gaze steadily. "Don't anymore, unless they force my hand." "How noble." He shrugged, unbothered by her sarcasm. "Never claimed to be noble, just tired." They remounted as the afternoon heat reached its peak. Clara tried to maintain distance between their bodies, but the horse's gait made it impossible. She could feel the solid warmth of him through his shirt, smell leather and gunpowder and something else sage. Maybe, or pine. An hour later, the wind shifted, carrying with it a wall of dust that turned the sky brown. Jonas cursed under his breath, wheeling the horse toward a rocky outcropping. "Sandstorm," he said tersely. "Hold tight." The storm hit like a living thing, howling and clawing at them with gritty fingers. Clara buried her face against Jonas's back, feeling him hunch forward to shield them both. The horse struggled against the wind, and for terrifying moments, she thought they might be blown clear off the trail. Jonas found a shallow cave in the rocks, barely more than an indentation, but enough to provide some shelter. He pulled her off the horse and pushed her into the space, then positioned himself at the entrance, using his body as a barrier against the worst of the storm. Clara huddled in the darkness, listening to the wind shriek like all the demons of hell. Sand found its way through every gap, coating her skin, filling her mouth with grit. She could barely see Jonas's outline, but she could feel him there, solid and unmoving as the rocks themselves. Time lost meaning in the brown darkness. It might have been minutes or hours before the wind began to die, when it finally calmed to mere gusts. Jonas turned to check on her. "You hurt?" "No." Her voice came out raspy. "Though I might have swallowed half the desert." He actually smiled at that, just a quick quirk of his lips, but it transformed his face entirely. For a moment, she could see the man he might have been before violence carved its marks on him. They emerged to find the landscape transformed. Dunes had shifted, familiar landmarks erased. The horse stood patient where Jonas had tied it, coated in dust but unharmed. Jonas brushed the animal down with surprising gentleness, speaking to it in low, soothing tones. "You care more about that horse than most men care about their wives," Clara observed. "Diesel here saved my life more times than I can count." He patted the stallion's neck. "Besides, he doesn't talk back." "How fortunate for you that you bought a wife. Then, all the convenience of ownership without the pesky conversation." Jonas paused in his brushing. "That what you think that I bought you for convenience?" "Why else you don't know me, I don't know you. The only thing between us is my father's debt and your money." He was quiet for a long moment, then resumed tending to the horse. "Maybe that's enough for now." They rode on as the sun began its descent, painting the desert in shades of red and gold. The storm had cost them time, and Jonas pushed harder to make up the distance. Clara's body ached from the unfamiliar ride, her skin raw where the sand had scoured it. As darkness fell, they reached Shepherd's Rock, a massive formation that did indeed resemble a hunched figure watching over phantom flocks. Jonas made camp with practiced efficiency, gathering dried mesquite for a fire while Clara collapsed gratefully on solid ground. She watched him work, noting the way he moved through the familiar tasks. Everything about him spoke of a man accustomed to solitude, to relying only on himself. When the fire crackled to life, he sat across from her, the flames casting dancing shadows on his scarred face. "We'll reach the mountains by tomorrow night," he said. "My place is another day beyond that." "Your place?" Clara pulled her mother's quilt around her shoulders. "What's it like?" "Quiet." He poked at the fire with a stick. "Clean water, good hunting, nobody for miles." Sounds lonely. It was. The implied "until now" hung between them, unspoken but clear. Clara didn't know how to respond to that, so she changed the subject. "Why did you really pay my father's debt, and don't tell me you were looking for a wife? Men like you don't need to buy women." Jonas was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out something she never expected to see: a worn leather Bible, its pages gilt-edged and obviously well-read. "Man can carry a lot of weight," he said quietly, thumbing through the delicate pages. Blood on his hands, ghosts at his back. Sometimes he needs a reason to be better than he was. "And you think I'm that reason? Maybe." He looked at her across the fire. "Or maybe I just couldn't stand the thought of Silas Crane getting his hooks into another innocent. Man's destroyed enough lives. So you saved me out of guilt." "Does it matter why?" Clara considered this. "I suppose not. I'm here either way." He nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. Then, to her amazement, he began to read from the Bible, his deep voice soft in the desert night. It was Psalms. She realized the 23rd. The familiar words washed over her, so at odds with everything she thought she knew about Jonas Blackthorne. When he finished, she found her voice. "Where did a gunslinger learn scripture?" "My mother." A ghost of memory crossed his face. "She died when I was 12, but she made sure I could read first. Said a man needed to know both the Word of God and the ways of the world if he hoped to survive either. Wise woman." "She was—" They lapsed into silence, the fire popping between them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, answered by another. The desert that had seemed so empty during the day came alive with small sounds, the rustle of nocturnal hunters, the whisper of wind through rocks. "You should sleep," Jonas said eventually. "Long day tomorrow." Clara spread her blanket on the sandy ground, using her bundled dress as a pillow. She expected to lie awake, her mind racing with all that had happened, but exhaustion pulled her under almost immediately. She woke once in the night to find Jonas still sitting by the dying fire, keeping watch. The stars above were brilliant in the clear air, and for a moment, she forgot to be afraid or angry. There was something almost peaceful about this, the vast quiet of the desert, the crackle of embers, the solid presence of a man standing guard against the darkness. When morning came, bringing with it the familiar ritual of breaking camp, Clara felt something had shifted between them. Not trust. Exactly, that would take far more than shared hardship and a few conversations. But perhaps the beginning of understanding. As they mounted up for another day's ride toward the mountains, toward whatever life awaited her as Jonas Blackthorne's wife, Clara found herself thinking of her mother's words again. Be stronger than the storm. She had survived the sandstorm. She had survived being sold and torn from everything familiar. Perhaps, with time and patience and no small amount of courage, she could survive Jonas Blackthorne too. Maybe even do more than survive. The sun climbed higher, and they rode on toward the blue shadows of the mountains, where answers to questions she hadn't yet learned to ask waited like promises in the thin, clean air. The mountain trail wound upward like a serpent's path, each turn revealing new vistas of pine-covered slopes and distant peaks crowned with snow. Clara had never seen such country so different from the flat, dusty plains of Santa Esperanza. The air grew cooler with elevation, carrying the scent of resin and fresh water. "Almost there," Jonas said, the first words he'd spoken in an hour. They crested a final ridge, and Clara caught her breath. Below, nestled in a valley between protective peaks, sat a log cabin that defied every expectation she'd harbored. She'd imagined a crude shack, perhaps, or a hideout festooned with the grim trophies of an outlaw's life. Instead, she saw a well-built home with a stone chimney, glass windows that caught the afternoon light, and a covered porch that wrapped around two sides. A vegetable garden grew in neat rows nearby, and a small barn stood to the east. A creek sparkled through the property, its music audible even from the ridge. "This is your home." She couldn't hide her surprise. "Our home now." He guided Diesel down the slope with practiced ease. "Built it myself, 3 winters back." As they drew closer, more details emerged. The logs were carefully fitted, chinked with precision. Firewood stood stacked under the eaves in orderly cords. Even the fence around the garden showed careful craftsmanship, each post straight and true. Jonas dismounted at the barn, immediately moving to help her down. This time, Clara accepted his assistance, her legs trembling from 2 days of hard riding. He steadied her with hands that were gentle despite their strength. "I'll see to Diesel," he said. "House is unlocked. Make yourself comfortable." Clara approached the cabin with cautious steps, pushing open the heavy door to reveal an interior that once again challenged her assumptions. The main room was spacious and clean, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Furniture, a table, chairs. A rocking chair by the hearth showed the same careful construction as the house itself. Books lined shelves on one wall, their spines revealing titles that ranged from agricultural guides to poetry. A ladder led to what appeared to be a loft area above. But it was the smaller details that truly caught her attention. Curtains at the windows, clearly store-bought rather than homemade. A rag rug on the floor in a cheerful pattern. A vase on the table, empty now but waiting for wildflowers. This wasn't just a shelter or a hideout. It was a home waiting to be lived in. She was examining the kitchen area, marveling at the well-organized supplies and the hand pump that brought water right indoors. When Jonas entered carrying her small bundle of possessions, "Bedroom's through there," he indicated a door she hadn't noticed. "You'll want to get settled." Clara followed his gesture, pushing open the door to find a proper bedroom with a brass bed, a washstand, and a wardrobe. The quilt on the bed was new, she realized, as were the pillows. On the washstand sat a pitcher and bowl, decorated with tiny blue flowers. "You prepared for my arrival?" she said, not quite a question. Jonas stood in the doorway, seeming suddenly too large for the space. "Ordered a few things when I knew I'd be bringing back a wife. Figured you'd need women's comforts." The consideration of it, the planning, made something twist in Clara's chest. "And where will you sleep?" "Loft's mine." He shifted, clearly uncomfortable with the domestic conversation. "You'll have privacy here. There's a bolt on the door if you want it." The implication hung between them he was offering her security, the ability to lock him out of what was technically their marriage bed. Clara didn't know whether to be relieved or insulted. "I'm not—" Jonas ran a hand through his dark hair, disturbing its usual order. "I didn't buy you for that. Want to be clear on it. You're my wife-in-law, but that's all, unless you decide otherwise. Could be never, for all I care. Just needed to get you away from Crane." "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Why do you care what happens to me?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Had a sister once, Sarah. Sweet girl, trusting. Got tangled up with the wrong man when she was just 17. By the time I found out what was happening, it was too late. She died bringing his baby into the world, and him already gone with her dowry money." "I'm sorry," Clara said softly. "Long time ago." But the pain in his voice suggested otherwise. "When I heard about Crane setting his sights on you, sniffing around your father's debts, couldn't let it happen again. So you saved me. Clara sank onto the edge of the bed. But Jonas, I'm not your sister. You can't bring her back by protecting me. I know that. His gray eyes met hers steadily. But maybe I can sleep better knowing one less innocent got destroyed by men like Crane. That's enough. He left her then, closing the door softly behind him. Clara sat in the quiet bedroom, trying to reconcile this man with the legendary Black Iron, a killer who read scripture, who built beautiful furniture and planted gardens, who bought a wife to save her, not claim her. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her spare dress in the wardrobe that smelled of cedar, placing her mother's Bible on the small bedside table. The photograph of her parents found a home on the dresser, their young faces smiling at her across the years. A soft knock interrupted her settling in. "Supper's ready when you are." Jonas called through the door. Clara found him in the kitchen, ladling stew from a pot on the stove. The smell made her stomach growl embarrassingly loud. "Rabbit stew," he explained, setting a bowl before her. "Fresh bread in the box there. Coffee if you want it." They ate in companionable silence, Clara savoring the first hot meal she'd had in days. The stew was well seasoned, the bread crusty and good. Another surprise the fearsome gunslinger could cook. "Tomorrow I'll show you around proper," Jonas said as they cleared the dishes together. "Show you where things are. How to work the pump if it sticks. There's a root cellar out back. Smokehouse for meat. Garden needs tending. I'm no hand with vegetables." "You built all this yourself?" "Had help with the barn. Rest I did alone." He dried the dishes as she washed, their movements falling into an easy rhythm. "Meant to build a life here, away from what I was." "And what were you?" Clara asked boldly. Jonas set down the plate he was drying, his expression distant. "A man who solved problems with bullets, who took money to end lives, who got so good at killing. Folks forgot I was ever anything else." "What changed?" "Got tired of the blood, tired of seeing fear in everyone's eyes, tired of becoming the monster mothers used to scare their children into behaving." He resumed drying. Movements precise. "Man named Samuel Kress, a preacher, found me shot up after a job went bad. Could have let me die. Probably should have. Instead, he nursed me back and talked to me about redemption, about choosing a different path." "And you believed him?" "Not at first, but he kept at it. Read to me from that Bible while I was too weak to leave. Told me about Paul on the road to Damascus, about how a man could change if he truly wanted to." Jonas hung the dish towel carefully. "When I healed up, I left the life, came here, built this place. Been trying to be better ever since." Clara studied him in the lamplight. "Do you think it's working being better?" "Some days." He met her gaze. "Today, bringing you here safe, giving you a chance at something other than Crane's clutches, yeah, today I think maybe it's working." Later, as Clara prepared for bed in her new room, she reflected on the strangeness of it all. This morning she'd been a woman sold to pay a debt, riding with a killer toward an unknown fate. Tonight, she was, what? The protected wife of a man seeking redemption, a guest in a well-appointed home, a woman with choices, even if she didn't quite understand them yet. She opened her mother's Bible, seeking comfort in familiar passages. A piece of paper fluttered out not her mother's careful script, but bold male handwriting. Jonas must have placed it there while she was washing up. Mrs. Blackthorne. It read, "The general store in Pine Ridge delivers monthly. Make a list of anything you need: clothing, supplies, whatever would make you comfortable. We have accounts there. J.B." Clara traced the words with one finger. Such a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. He was offering her not just shelter, but the means to shape her life here, to make choices. She moved to the window, looking out at the star-filled sky. Somewhere out there, her father was probably deep in his cups, trying to forget what he'd done. Silas Crane was counting his money, planning his next victim. But here, in this unexpected haven, she was safe. A soft sound from the main room caught her attention. Through the door, she could hear Jonas moving about, the creak of the rocking chair, the rustle of pages. He was reading again, she realized. The gunslinger studying scripture by lamplight. Clara returned to her bed, slipping between sheets that smelled of lavender and sunshine. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adjustments to this strange situation. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something like hope. The cabin settled around her with comfortable sounds, logs shifting in the fireplace, wind singing through the pines outside, the creek murmuring its endless story. And somewhere in those sounds, like a promise she was only beginning to understand, was the possibility of home. The autumn days settled into a rhythm as natural as breathing. Clara woke each morning to find coffee already brewing. Jonas having risen with the sun to tend the animals and check his trap lines. They shared quiet breakfasts, then went about their separate tasks, he to his hunting and woodcutting, she to establishing her presence in this mountain home. 3 weeks had passed since her arrival, and the initial strangeness had given way to something approaching comfort. Clara had written her list for the general store, blushing as she added personal items no man should have to know about. Jonas had taken it without comment, returning from Pine Ridge with everything she'd requested, and more, including a bolt of blue calico she hadn't asked for but had admired in the catalog. Now, on a crisp October morning, Clara set out to gather firewood from the pile Jonas had split. The task was simple enough, one she'd done countless times at her father's home. But the mountain terrain was different from the flat desert, full of hidden roots and unexpected slopes. She was reaching for a particularly nice piece of pine when her foot caught on something buried in the fallen leaves. The world tilted, and she went down hard, her ankle twisting beneath her with a sharp crack of pain. "Oh!" The cry escaped before she could stop it, echoing off the mountain walls. She tried to stand, but fire shot up her leg the moment she put weight on the injured foot. Tears pricked her eyes, not just from pain, but from frustration. Such a simple task, and she'd bungled it like a child. "Clara." Jonas's voice came from somewhere near the barn, sharp with concern. She heard his boots on the path, moving fast. "What happened?" He rounded the woodpile to find her on the ground, cradling her ankle. His face went tight with worry as he knelt beside her. "Let me see." His hands were gentle as he unlaced her boot, easing it off despite her hiss of pain. "Can you move it?" Clara tried, biting her lip as fresh tears escaped. "It hurts." "Not broken, I think, but sprained good." He looked up at her, and something in his gray eyes made her breath catch. "Need to get you inside. Put your arms around my neck." "I can walk." "No, you can't." Before she could protest further, he scooped her up as easily as if she weighed nothing. "Hold on." Clara had no choice but to wrap her arms around his neck, acutely aware of his strength, the warmth of him through his shirt. He carried her into the cabin and settled her in the rocking chair with infinite care. "Stay put," he ordered, then disappeared into her bedroom. He returned with pillows and the quilt from her bed, arranging them to elevate her foot. "Cold water first, to keep the swelling down." She watched, bemused, as the fearsome Jonas Blackthorne bustled about like a mother hen. He brought snow from the ice house, wrapping it in cloth to make a compress. His touch as he applied it to her ankle was impossibly gentle. "Where did you learn doctoring?" she asked. "Picked up a few things over the years. Had to, living alone." He tested the swelling with careful fingers. "This'll hurt for a few days. You need to stay off it. But the chickens, I'll tend them. And the bread, I can make bread, Clara." A hint of amusement colored his voice. "Did it for years before you came." I don't want to be useless." Jonas sat back on his heels, looking up at her with an expression she couldn't read. You could never be useless. This cabin's been more alive in 3 weeks than in the 3 years I've lived here. Now hush and let me take care of you." The role reversal felt strange. She'd grown accustomed to their careful dance of distance, the way they moved around each other like polite strangers sharing space. But injury had broken down those walls, forcing an intimacy that left her flustered. Jonas made her comfortable, bringing her books, her sewing, anything she might need within arm's reach. He prepared lunch simple but satisfying and insisted on cleaning up despite her protests. As afternoon wore on, Clara found herself dozing in the chair, lulled by warmth and the lingering effects of pain. She woke to find the light changed, late afternoon sun slanting through the windows, and Jonas reading in the chair he'd pulled close to hers. "What are you reading?" she asked sleepily. He showed her the cover Tennyson's poems. Another surprise in a man full of them. "Would you—" She hesitated, then forged ahead. "Would you read aloud I used to read to my mother when she was ill? It helped pass the time." Jonas studied her for a moment, then nodded. His deep voice filled the room, bringing life to words about Ulysses and his voyages. Clara closed her eyes, letting the rhythm wash over her. There was something deeply intimate about it. His voice in the gathering dusk, the warmth of the fire, the strange domesticity of the scene. When he finished the poem, she opened her eyes to find him watching her. "My turn," she said. "Hand me the Bible." They passed the book back and forth as evening deepened, reading passages that comforted and challenged. Jonas stumbled sometimes over the formal language, but his sincerity made up for any lack of polish. "Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature." Clara read, "Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new." 2 Corinthians. Jonas murmured, "Samuel the preacher who helped me, he was partial to that verse. Do you believe it, that a man can truly become new?" "I'm trying to—" He took the Bible from her hands, his fingers brushing hers. "Some days I feel it, like maybe the blood's washing away bit by bit. Other days—" He shrugged. "Tell me about your family," Clara said impulsively, "before everything changed." Jonas was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "We had a small ranch in Texas. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. My PA was a hard man but fair. Ma tried to soften his edges. Sarah was the baby, 8 years younger than me." "What happened to them?" "Comanches hit while I was away at market. Came back to ashes and graves." His voice was matter-of-fact, but Clara saw the tension in his jaw. "I was 17, sold what was left, started hiring out my gun. Figured if the world wanted to be violent, I'd be better at it than anyone." "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate. "A long time ago." He stood abruptly. "Let me check that ankle." His hands were gentle as he examined the swelling. Applied fresh snow. Clara found herself studying his face, the concentration in his expression, the way his scar pulled slightly when he frowned. "Why do you keep the Bible?" she asked. "If it reminds you of what you lost." "Because it reminds me of what I lost." He rewrapped her ankle with practiced efficiency. Man needs to remember where he came from, especially if he can't go back. That night, Jonas insisted on helping her to her room, supporting her weight as she hopped on one foot. At the doorway, they paused, suddenly awkward. "Thank you," Clara said, "for taking care of me." "It's what husbands do." The words seemed to surprise him as much as her. I know what you mean." She squeezed his arm gently. "Good night, Jonas." But sleep eluded her. She lay in the dark, replaying the day's events, the careful tenderness of his hands, the rumble of his voice reading poetry, the glimpses of the man beneath the gunslinger's reputation. She thought about his family, destroyed by violence, and how that loss had shaped him into an instrument of violence himself. The tragic irony of it made her heart ache. A soft sound from the main room caught her attention. Rising carefully, She hopped to the door and opened it a crack. Jonas sat by the dying fire, but he wasn't reading. His head was bowed, hands clasped, lips moving in what could only be prayer. Clara watched, transfixed. This man who'd lived by the gun, who'd earned a fearsome reputation across the territories, praying like a penitent in the firelight. She thought of the verse she'd read earlier about becoming a new creature and wondered if perhaps she was witnessing that transformation. She must have made some sound because his head came up, catching her, watching. They stared at each other across the darkened room, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. "Couldn't sleep?" she offered unnecessarily. "Your ankle paining you." "Some?" She hopped forward, grabbing the door frame for support. "Jonas, You should rest." But he stood, moving toward her. "Here." Once again, he lifted her easily, carrying her back to bed. But this time, when he set her down, he lingered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Clara," her name was barely a whisper. "I need you to know I never expected this isn't what I planned." "What isn't?" You. The way you've made this place feel like—" He stopped, jaw working. "I'm no good with words." "Try." She caught his hand, holding it between both of hers. "Please." "I bought your contract to save you from Crane. Told myself that was all. Just another good deed to balance the ledger. But these weeks, having you here—" He turned his hand to interlock their fingers. "You're making me want things I gave up on. Home, family. A reason to be better than what I was." "Jonas." "I'm not asking anything," he said quickly. "Not pushing. Just needed you to know that you're not here on sufferance. You're here because I want you here. However, you'll have me." Clara's heart thundered in her chest. "And if I want more than just a business arrangement?" His breath caught. "Then we take it slow. Do it right. Court like proper folks, even if we're already married." "I'd like that." She squeezed his fingers. "I'd like that very much." Jonas lifted their joined hands, pressing his lips to her knuckles in a gesture achingly tender. "Rest now. Heal. We've got time." He left her with that promise, and Clara lay back against her pillows, ankle throbbing but heart light. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, blanketing the mountain in pristine white. A new beginning, she thought, for both of them. In the main room, she heard Jonas banking the fire for the night, his movements careful and sure. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, in this cabin built by a man seeking redemption, something new and fragile and precious had taken root. Clara smiled in the darkness, thinking of her mother's words about being stronger than the storm. She'd found something better, someone to weather the storms with. And that, she thought as sleep finally claimed her, made all the difference. The winter had settled deep into the mountains, transforming the landscape into a crystalline wonderland. 2 months had passed since Clara's injury, and in that time, the careful walls between her and Jonas had slowly crumbled like spring ice. They'd kept to his promise of courting proper shared meals became lingering conversations. Evening Bible readings turned to intimate discussions by firelight, and tentative touches grew bolder with each passing day. Now, on this particular December evening, tension crackled in the air like lightning before a storm. It had been building all week, ever since Jonas returned from Pine Ridge with news that sent ice through Clara's veins. "Silas Crane's put out word," he'd said, jaw tight. "Offering $500 to anyone who brings you back, says you are stolen property." Property. Clara had spat the word like poison, as if his claim ever had legitimacy. "It doesn't, but money talks loud in these parts. We had a visitor today while you were at the creek. Young buck named Tom Everett, asking questions in town." Clara's hand had flown to her throat. "Tom, he's here." Jonas's eyes had sharpened. "You know him?" He courted me once, before Papa's debts got bad. I refused him." She'd looked away. He didn't take it well. The darkness that crossed Jonas's face then should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel protected, cherished. He won't touch you, I promise you that. But Tom Everett had proven more persistent than expected. He'd been spotted twice more near their valley, and Jonas had taken to wearing his guns even while doing chores. The easy peace of their mountain home had been shattered by the threat of outside violence. Tonight, though, Clara was determined to push those worries aside. She'd made Jonas's favorite stew, baked fresh bread, even opened a jar of the preserved peaches she'd been saving. He'd noticed her efforts, his eyes warm with appreciation and something deeper. "What's the occasion?" he'd asked. "Can't a wife cook a nice meal for her husband?" The words wife and husband still sent thrills through her, even though they'd yet to fully claim those titles. Now, with supper cleared and the fire burning low, they sat together on the small settee Jonas had built just last week, built specifically so they could sit together, though he hadn't said so. Clara was reading from Wuthering Heights, a book that had arrived in their last supply order, while Jonas cleaned his rifle with methodical precision. She was just reaching the part where Heathcliff returns when a sound outside made Jonas go rigid. In one fluid motion, he was on his feet, rifle ready. "Stay here," he commanded, moving toward the door. But Clara had learned her own lessons about courage. She grabbed the shotgun from above the mantel Jonas had taught her to shoot these past weeks and followed. "I said stay. And I said I'm not property to be ordered about," she whispered back fiercely. Despite the situation, his lips quirked. Stubborn woman. The knock, when it came, was bold, demanding. Jonas motioned Clara behind the door, then opened it carefully. Tom Everett stood on their porch, backed by two other men Clara didn't recognize. Tom looked older, harder than she remembered, with a scraggly beard and mean eyes. "Jonas Blackthorne," Tom said, trying for bravado but unable to hide the fear Jonas inspired. "I've come for what's mine." "Nothing here belongs to you, boy." Jonas's voice was winter ice. "Clara Donovan belongs with decent folks, not some washed-up killer playing house in the mountains." "Clara Blackthorne," Jonas corrected softly. "My wife, legal and binding. A forced marriage ain't valid. Everyone knows you bought her like cattle. She comes with us now, or—" The click of Clara cocking the shotgun cut him off. She stepped into view, weapon steady. "Or what? Tom, you'll force me, like you tried to force me 2 years ago behind Murphy's barn." Tom's face went red. "That was a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. You wouldn't take no for an answer then, and you won't now. But I've got 12-gauge worth of no that says you'll leave this mountain tonight." "You've bewitched her." Tom snarled at Jonas. "Turned her into some kind of—" He never finished. Jonas moved faster than thought, his fist connecting with Tom's jaw in a crack that echoed off the mountains. Tom went down hard, and his companions reached for their guns. "Don't!" Jonas's Colt appeared in his hand like magic. "Take your friend and go. Come back, and I'll forget I'm trying to be a better man." The two men gathered Tom, who was spitting blood and curses. As they dragged him away, he shouted back, "This ain't over. Crane's money will bring more men. You can't protect her forever." Jonas watched until they were out of sight, then turned to Clara. The look in his eyes made her breath catch pride, fear, and something wild and protective. "You did good," he said roughly. "But Clara, if something had happened—" "Nothing happened. We protected our home together." "Our home." He set his gun aside, moving closer. "God help me, Clara, when you stood there with that shotgun, defending us—" He cupped her face in his hands. "I've never wanted anything the way I want you." The air between them combusted. Clara dropped the shotgun, reaching for him as his mouth claimed hers. This wasn't the gentle, careful kisses they'd shared before. This was fire and need and 2 months of careful restraint shattering like glass. Clara, he breathed against her lips. We should— No more should, she interrupted. No more waiting. I'm your wife. Jonas, make me your wife in truth. He pulled back to search her eyes. You're sure, because once I have you, Clara, I'll never let you go. Never. Promise, she whispered. His answer was to sweep her into his arms, carrying her to her bedroom, their bedroom now. He set her down gently, his hands shaking slightly as he lit the lamp. I need to see you, he said hoarsely. Need to know this is real. Clara's hands were steady as she began unlacing her dress. It's real. We're real. What followed was a claiming and a surrender, a dance as old as time made new by their particular story. Jonas worshipped her with hands and mouth and body, showing with actions what he still struggled to say with words. Clara met him with equal passion, finally understanding what her mother had meant about the fire between a man and woman who truly chose each other. At one point, carried away by sensation and emotion, Clara moved above him with newfound boldness. The bedframe, sturdy as Jonas had built it, creaked ominously under their passion. Sweet Lord, Jonas groaned, his hands gripping her hips. You're gonna break this bedframe. Clara laughed, wild and free. Then build a stronger one. Later, much later, they lay entwined in the aftermath, the quilt pulled over their cooling bodies. Jonas traced lazy patterns on Clara's bare shoulder, his touch reverent. I love you, he said quietly. Should have said it sooner. Should have said it that first day when you stood up to me with fire in your eyes. But I love you, Clara Blackthorne. And I love you, she replied, pressing a kiss to the scar on his chest, another story he'd shared with her. My unlikely protector, my reformed gunslinger, my husband. Your husband? He tightened his arms around her. I like the sound of that. Even if I'm a stubborn woman who doesn't follow orders, especially then. He kissed her temple. Though we need to talk about you confronting armed men. We protected each other, Clara reminded him. That's what partners do. Partners. Jonas considered the word. Yes, that's what we are. They talked quietly as the night deepened, making plans. Tom's threat hadn't been idle. More men would come. They'd need to be ready. I could take you away. Jonas offered. California, maybe. Oregon, somewhere Crane can't reach. No. Clara's voice was firm. This is our home. We stand and fight for it. Together. Together. As dawn approached, painting the mountains in shades of rose and gold, they made love again, slower this time, savoring each touch and sigh. The broken bed frame had been temporarily reinforced, though Jonas promised to build a new one, stronger and bigger. He'd said with a wicked grin that made Clara blush. When full daylight came, they rose together, moving about their morning routines with new ease. The intimacy of the night had translated into a dozen small touches, his hand on her waist as he passed, her fingers brushing his as she handed him coffee. No regrets, Jonas asked as they stood on the porch, watching the sun crest the peaks. Only one, Clara said. When he looked at her in concern, she smiled. That it took us this long, he laughed, pulling her against his side. Then we'll have to make up for lost time. Jonas Blackthorne, are you suggesting improper behavior? Nothing improper about a man loving his wife, he said, turning to kiss her soundly. In fact, I'd say it's the most proper thing in the world. As they stood there, united in body and soul, Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here, sold to settle a debt. She'd found something priceless. In trying to save her, Jonas had saved himself. Together, they'd built something worth fighting for. Tom Everett and Silas Crane could bring their threats and their hired guns. She and Jonas would face them as they'd faced everything else together. Partners in love and war, bound by choice rather than circumstance. The mountains stood witness to their commitment, ancient and enduring, and in their shadow, a gunslinger and his bride began their true life together, ready for whatever storms might come. The rumors started as whispers in Pine Ridge, spreading like wildfire through the mountain communities. Clara Blackthorne, the woman who'd been sold to settle her father's debts, had somehow bewitched the feared Jonas Blackthorne. She'd turned the killer soft, they said, used feminine wiles to control him. The stories grew more elaborate with each telling, until Clara was painted as everything from a witch to a manipulative seductress who'd ensnared an innocent man. Jonas heard the talk during his monthly supply run, his jaw tightening with each overheard conversation. At Murphy's general store, 2 women fell silent when he entered, but not before he caught the words, "Poor man doesn't know what hit him." "The usual order, Mr. Blackthorne?" Murphy asked nervously, eyeing Jonas's clenched fists. "The usual," Jonas confirmed. "And add some of that fabric Clara was admiring last time, the green with the little flowers." Murphy's wife sniffed audibly. "Spoiling her, are you? That's how they get their hooks in deeper." Jonas turned slowly, fixing her with a stare that had once made grown men reach for their guns. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you don't know the first thing about my wife or our marriage. I'd appreciate if you'd keep your opinions to yourself." He left with his supplies and a growing anger that had nothing to do with slights against himself. He'd weathered worse talk in his gunslinging days, but Clara didn't deserve this. Back at the cabin, he found her humming as she worked in the garden, her hair golden in the afternoon sun. The sight of her happy, healthy, at peace, made his chest tight with emotion. "You're back early," she said, smiling up at him. Then her expression changed, reading his mood with the intuition born of months together. "What happened?" "Nothing worth repeating." He set down the supplies, pulling her into his arms. "How's your day been?" "Jonas," she pulled back to study his face. "Don't hide things from me. What happened in town?" He sighed, knowing she'd persist until he told her. "Just talk. Folks have nothing better to do than gossip." "About us?" When he nodded, her chin lifted in that way he'd come to love. "What are they saying?" "That you've bewitched me, that you're using me somehow." He cupped her face gently. "Nothing worth our attention." But Clara's eyes had gone hard. "They think I'm manipulating you, that I'm some kind of fallen woman who trapped you." "Clara." "No." She pulled away, pacing with agitation. "I won't have it. I won't have people thinking you're weak because you chose to love me, or that I'm something shameful you should be protected from." "I don't care what they think." "But I do." She whirled to face him. "Don't you see, this is what Crane wants, to isolate us, turn the community against us, make us easier targets." Jonas hadn't considered that angle, but now he saw the truth of it. Crane was too smart to keep sending men directly. Better to poison the well of public opinion first. 2 days later, their suspicions were confirmed when Tom Everett appeared at the edge of their property. He didn't approach the cabin this time, just sat his horse at the tree line, watching, waiting. "He's trying to spook us," Jonas said, checking his rifle for the dozenth time. "Well, it's working," Clara admitted. She'd been jumpy all morning, startling at every sound. "How long do you think he'll stay out there?" "Until I make him leave." Jonas started for the door, but Clara caught his arm. "That's what he wants. You go out there guns blazing, and suddenly you're the violent one, the killer who can't control himself, and I'm the poor woman caught in your web." Jonas growled in frustration because she was right. "So what do we do?" Clara straightened her shoulders. "We go to town. Together. Show them we're not hiding, not ashamed. Make them see the truth of us." "Clara, I don't think—" "Trust me." She squeezed his hand. "You've protected me with your strength. Let me protect us with mine." Which was how they found themselves riding into Pine Ridge that Sunday morning, dressed in their best clothes. Clara had insisted they attend church. Nothing shows respectability like public worship, she'd said. The small church fell silent when they entered. Jonas felt the weight of every stare, heard every whispered comment. His hand moved instinctively toward his gun, but Clara's touch on his arm stopped him. She walked with her head high, greeting people pleasantly despite their cold responses. They sat in a middle pew, Jonas feeling out of place in the house of worship. He hadn't been to proper church since his mother died, though his private prayers had become regular these past months. Reverend Patterson, a young man with kind eyes, began his sermon. To Jonas's surprise, he spoke about judgment and redemption, about Mary Magdalene and the woman at the well. His words seemed pointed, directed at the congregation's hardened hearts. After the service, as people filed out, Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, and Pine Ridge's self-appointed moral guardian blocked their path.
"Mrs. Blackthorne,"
she said, the title dripping with disdain.
"How surprising to see you here."
Why would it be surprising? Clara asked calmly. My husband and I worship regularly, though usually in the privacy of our home, reading scripture together. Your husband? Mrs. Henderson's gaze flicked to Jonas. Yes, we've all heard how that came about. Quite the scandal. The only scandal, Clara said, her voice carrying clearly, is how quick people are to judge what they don't understand. Yes, my father sold me to settle a debt. Yes, Jonas paid it. But what happened after that? He gave me a choice, offered me freedom, protection without demands. He showed me kindness when the world showed me cruelty. A crowd had gathered. Drawn by the confrontation, Jonas saw Tom Everett lurking at the edge, eyes glittering with malice. Clara continued, her voice gaining strength. You want to paint me as some temptress who corrupted a good man. Jonas Blackthorne was already good when I met him. Broken by loss, yes, hardened by violence he never sought, but good at his core. All I did was see it. Pretty words, Tom called out, but we all know what kind of woman sells herself. He never finished. Clara moved faster than Jonas expected, her palm cracking across Tom's face with enough force to snap his head sideways.
"The kind who survives," she said fiercely. "The kind who refuses to let men like you and Silas Crane destroy her. The kind who finds love in the unlikeliest places and holds onto it with both hands."
She turned back to the crowd, many of whom looked stunned by her boldness.
"You want to know if I bewitched my husband? Look at him.
Really look. Does he seem diminished, weakened? Or does he seem like a man who finally found something worth living for besides vengeance?" Jonas stepped forward then, taking his place beside her. My wife speaks truth. She saved me, not through witchcraft or manipulation, but through courage, through seeing past what I was to what I could be. If that makes me bewitched, then I pray the spell never breaks. Reverend Patterson cleared his throat. Perhaps we all need to remember that judgment belongs to the Lord alone, and that love, real love, is never something to be ashamed of. An older woman Jonas recognized as Mrs. Dalton, the shopkeeper's mother, stepped forward. I remember you, Clara Donovan. Remember your mother, too. Good woman, strong. I see her in you. She shot a glare at Mrs. Henderson. And I see nothing but a young woman making the best of hard circumstances. No shame in that. The crowd began to disperse, some looking thoughtful, others still suspicious. But the tide had shifted slightly. Tom slunk away. His support diminished. As they prepared to leave, Reverend Patterson approached. That was brave, what you did, both of you. If you ever need anything sanctuary, counsel, a friendly ear, my door is open. Thank you, Reverend, Clara said warmly. We may take you up on that. The ride home was quiet, both lost in thought. Finally, Jonas spoke. You didn't have to do that. Stand up for me like that.
Yes, I did.
Clara reached over to take his hand. We're partners. Remember, your battles are mine. That slap, though, Jonas chuckled. Remind me never to cross you."
"You'd never give me cause."
She squeezed his fingers.
"But Jonas, this isn't over. Crane won't stop, and Tom's humiliation will only make him more dangerous."
"I know." Jonas's expression hardened. "But we showed them today. Showed them we won't be divided. Won't be driven out by gossip and lies." That night, as they prepared for bed, a rifle shot cracked through the darkness. The kitchen window exploded in a shower of glass. "Down!" Jonas shouted, pulling Clara to the floor. 2 more shots followed, thudding into the walls.
"Tom," Clara whispered.
"Most likely." Jonas crawled to where his guns hung, strapping them on with practiced ease. "Stay low. I'm going out the back."
"Jonas, no. I won't let them terrorize us in our own home."
He kissed her quickly. "Bar the door behind me." He slipped out into the darkness, becoming one with the shadows he'd once called home. Clara huddled by the window, shotgun ready, praying for his safety. Minutes stretched like hours before she heard shots from the woods, 3 in rapid succession. Then silence. Her heart hammered as she waited, feared, hoped. Then Jonas's voice, "Clara, it's clear. Open up!" She flew to the door, throwing herself into his arms the moment he entered. "Are you hurt? What happened?"
"Tom and 2 others. They're running back to town, minus their horses and guns."
His smile was grim.
"Might have trouble sitting for a while, too.
Rock salt in the backside tends to sting."
"Despite everything," Clara laughed, "you didn't kill them."
"No."
He held her tighter. "You were right. They wanted me to be the violent one. Instead, they're the ones who attacked a man and woman in their home."
"Come morning, that story will be all over town." They spent the rest of the night cleaning glass and patching bullet holes. By dawn, their home bore scars but still stood strong, much like their marriage itself.
"We survived another test,"
Clara said, as they watched the sun rise from their damaged but unbroken home. "We did."
Jonas wrapped his arms around her from behind. "But I have a feeling the real storm is still coming."
Clara leaned back against his solid warmth.
"Then we'll face it like we've faced everything else. Together."
"Always together." As the sun climbed higher, bathing their valley in golden light, they stood united against whatever darkness Silas Crane might send their way. The gossips could talk, Tom could scheme, but nothing could break what they'd built through choice, courage, and love. The mountains stood witness to their resolve, ancient guardians of a love that refused to yield, and in their shadow, Jonas and Clara Blackthorne prepared for the battles yet to come, stronger for having weathered this one side by side. The full moon hung like a silver dollar in the cloudless sky, casting stark shadows across the mountain valley. Jonas had been restless all day, that old instinct from his gunslinging days prickling at the back of his neck. Clara felt it too. The air itself seemed charged with menace. "They're coming tonight," Jonas said quietly as they finished supper. "I can feel it." Clara nodded, no longer questioning his intuition. "How many?" "Crane himself. I'd wager, with enough men to finish this." He checked his guns for the 3rd time. "Clara, I need you to promise me something." "No."
"You don't even know what I'm going to ask."
"You're going to ask me to run if things go bad, to leave you." She met his gaze steadily. "And the answer is no."
"Clara."
"We stand together. Jonas Blackthorne, live together or die together. That's what marriage means." He pulled her close, pressing his lips to her forehead. "Stubborn woman."
"You wouldn't love me any other way."
They prepared methodically. Jonas had taught Clara well these past months how to reload quickly, how to use cover, how to stay calm when bullets flew. They barricaded windows, positioned ammunition strategically, filled buckets with water in case of fire. "Remember," Jonas instructed, "Crane's smart. He won't just come charging. He'll try to draw us out, make us panic." As if summoned by his words,
A voice rang out from the darkness. "Blackthorn, Jonas Blackthorn, time to settle accounts." Silas Crane stepped into the moonlight at the edge of their clearing, dressed in his customary black. Behind him, shadows moved at least 6 men, maybe more. "Crane," Jonas called back from the window. "This is between you and me. Leave my wife out of it." Crane's laugh was cold as winter wind. "Your wife, you mean my property. The payment that was stolen from me."
"I was never yours,"
Clara shouted, unable to stay silent.
"Never anyone's property."
"Ah, the lovely Clara speaks." Crane's voice turned oily. "Come out, my dear. I promise you won't be harmed. It's only your husband who needs to answer for his crimes." "What crimes?" Jonas demanded. "Paying a debt fair and square. The crime of taking what I'd marked as mine. The crime of making me look weak." Crane's civilized veneer cracked, revealing the monster beneath. "Do you know what happened to my business after you rode off with her? People started thinking they could defy me. Started believing Silas Crane could be bested." "So this is about your pride," Clara said with contempt. "Pride, no, Mrs. Blackthorn. This is about power. And tonight, I take mine back." The attack came suddenly. Windows shattered as rifles opened up from multiple positions. Jonas pushed Clara down, returning fire with deadly accuracy. His first shot took a man from the roof of their barn. Clara heard the body hit the ground with a sickening thud. "Kitchen window." Clara spotted movement and fired the shotgun, driving back whoever had been attempting to flank them. The battle raged with terrible intensity. Jonas moved like a force of nature, his guns speaking death to any who showed themselves. But there were too many, and they were slowly being surrounded. "They're trying to burn us out." Clara smelled smoke from the back of the cabin. "Let them come," Jonas said grimly. "We'll make our stand here." But Clara had other ideas. She remembered something Jonas had told her about his old life, how the best way to break an ambush was to do the unexpected. "I'm going out there," she announced. "Like hell you are." "Trust me." She grabbed the rifle, checking its load. "Cover me." Before he could stop her, Clara burst through the front door, diving and rolling behind the water trough. Shots rang out, but Jonas's covering fire kept the attackers' heads down. "Tom Everett," Clara shouted. "I know you're out there, still hiding behind other men. Are you—" "Shut up." Tom's voice came from behind the barn, high with tension. "Did Crane promise you money, or did he promise you me?" Clara laughed bitterly. "Either way, you're a fool. He'll dispose of you the moment you're no longer useful." "I said shut up." Tom broke cover, rushing toward her position with his gun raised. It was what Clara had been waiting for. Her shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. As he fell, she saw Jonas emerge from the cabin like an avenging angel. What followed would be spoken of in whispers for years to come. Jonas Blackthorn, the man who'd tried to leave violence behind, became black iron one last time. He moved through the attackers like death itself, his guns thundering justice. Men who'd come to murder were cut down, their ambush turned to rout. Clara held her position, picking off anyone who tried to flank Jonas. She saw Crane attempting to retreat and fired, her bullet catching him in the leg. He went down screaming. Then, sudden silence. Gunsmoke drifted across the clearing like fog. Bodies lay scattered, some dead, others groaning. Jonas stood in the center of it all, guns still smoking, looking like something from the Old Testament. "Jonas," Clara called softly. He turned to her, and she saw the struggle in his eyes, the man of peace warring with the killer he'd been. She rose from cover, moving to him slowly, and took his face in her hands. "It's over," she whispered. "You protected us. You protected our home." "I killed them," he said hoarsely. "After all my prayers, all my promises to be better." "You defended. There's a difference." She kissed him gently. "Even the Bible speaks of righteous warriors." A moan drew their attention.
Crane was trying to crawl away, leaving a blood trail in the dirt. Jonas walked over, standing above the man who'd caused so much misery. "Go ahead," Crane spat. "Finish it. Show your wife what you really are." Jonas was quiet for a long moment. Then he holstered his guns. "No, you'll live. Crane, live knowing you were beaten. Live knowing your empire of fear is broken. The sheriff in Pine Ridge will be very interested to hear how you led an armed assault on innocent folks. This isn't over."
Yes, it is.
Clara stepped forward, her rifle trained on Crane.
Because if you ever come near us again, if you ever so much as whisper our names, it won't be Jonas who kills you. It'll be me. And unlike my husband, I haven't spent months praying for redemption. I'm still working on forgiveness."
The survivors of Crane's gang were rounded up, tied, and left for the sheriff to collect. Tom Everett lived, though he'd never have full use of his arm again. As dawn broke, Jonas and Clara stood among the wreckage of the night's violence.
"The killing," Jonas said quietly. "I thought I was past it. Thought I'd changed." "You have changed." Clara took his hand. The old Jonas Blackthorne would have hunted them down at the first threat, would have ended it with violence before it began. "You tried for peace. You only fought when there was no other choice. Still, the blood is on Crane's hands, not yours." She squeezed his fingers. "You're not defined by the violence done to you or the violence you do in defense. You're defined by the life you choose to live."
Reverend Patterson arrived with the sheriff near midday, having heard the gunfire from town. He surveyed the scene with sad eyes, but no judgment. "Self-defense, clear as day," the sheriff pronounced after hearing their account and seeing the evidence. "Crane's been a plague on this territory for too long. You did everyone a favor, Blackthorne." After the authorities left with their prisoners, the Reverend lingered. "You both all right, not in body, but in spirit." "Working on it, Reverend," Jonas admitted.
"Good. That's all any of us can do."
Patterson smiled gently. "You know, the Bible's full of warriors who had to fight to protect what they loved. David, Gideon, even Moses. The sin isn't in the fighting, it's in loving the fight. I don't see that in you, Jonas." That evening, as they worked together to repair the damage to their home, neighbors began arriving. The Daltons brought food. The Millers offered lumber. Even Mrs. Henderson came, grudgingly admitting she'd misjudged them. "Seems Crane had his hooks in deeper than we knew," she said stiffly. "Threatened folks who spoke against him. With him gone." She shrugged. "Maybe we can all breathe easier." As night fell, Jonas and Clara sat on their porch, watching stars appear one by one. The mountain valley was peaceful again. The only sounds the creek's murmur and the settling of the cabin.
"We survived,"
Clara said wonderingly.
"We actually survived."
"Together," Jonas agreed.
"Though I pray we never face such a test again. If we do, we'll handle it. Like we handle everything."
She leaned against his shoulder.
"Though maybe with less gunfire next time."
Jonas chuckled, the sound rusty but genuine. "I'll work on that."
"I know you will."
Clara tilted her face up for a kiss.
"That's who you are, a man who keeps trying to be better, even when the world forces you to be hard. That's the man I love."
They sat in comfortable silence, two souls who'd found each other across a chasm of violence and pain. The night's horrors would fade, but their bond had been forged in fire and would endure. In the distance, a wolf howled, not a threat, just a creature calling to its mate. Jonas squeezed Clara's hand, and she squeezed back. Whatever tomorrow brought, they'd face it as they'd faced tonight, united, unbroken, and utterly committed to the life they'd chosen together. The moon continued its journey across the sky, a silent witness to love's triumph over violence, hope's victory over fear, and in a cabin built by a reformed gunslinger, two hearts beat as one, finally and truly at peace. The spring morning dawned clear and bright. painting Eagle's Peak in shades of gold and rose. 6 months had passed since the night of violence, and the scars both on their home and in their hearts had begun to heal. Jonas saddled 2 horses while Clara packed provisions for their journey, her movements easy with the confidence of a woman who'd found her place in the world. "Ready?" Jonas asked, helping her mount even though she no longer needed the assistance. Some gestures had become ritual between them, small acts of care that spoke louder than words. "I've been ready for this conversation for weeks," Clara replied, adjusting her split riding skirt, a scandalous purchase from Pine Ridge that had raised eyebrows but proven practical for mountain living. They rode in companionable silence through familiar trails, past the spot where they'd first sheltered from the sandstorm, beyond the ridge where Clara had first glimpsed their home. Higher they climbed, until the air grew thin and sweet with the scent of alpine flowers. Eagle's Peak jutted into the sky like a finger pointing toward heaven. At its base, a meadow spread like nature's carpet, dotted with Indian paintbrush and columbine. Jonas dismounted, then helped Clara down, his hands lingering at her waist. "It's beautiful," she breathed, turning in a slow circle to take in the panoramic view. "You can see forever from here. My mother used to say that the closer you got to heaven, the clearer you could see your path." Jonas spread a blanket on the soft grass. Seemed like a good place for making decisions. They sat together, unpacking the simple meal Clara had prepared: fresh bread, cheese, dried apples, and coffee brewed over a small fire Jonas built with practiced efficiency. The domestic simplicity of it, sharing food in God's own cathedral, filled Clara with deep contentment. "The sheriff came by yesterday while you were hunting," Clara said eventually. "Silas Crane was sentenced 20 years hard labor." Jonas nodded slowly. "Just, though part of me wishes that you'd killed him that night." Clara studied her husband's profile. "No, you don't. Not really. You're not that man anymore." "Aren't I?" Jonas turned to her, vulnerability clear in his gray eyes. "Clara, I need to know something. When you look at me, what do you see, the gunslinger or the man trying to be better?" Clara considered the question, knowing he needed honesty more than comfort. "I see both. I see Jonas Blackthorne, who protected his family with deadly skill. And I see the same man who reads scripture by firelight and tends injured birds and built a home with his own hands. You're not one or the other, you're both. And that's what makes you whole." "And you," Jonas caught her hand. "Who are you now?" "Clara May." She smiled at the use of her maiden name. "Not Clara May anymore. Not the frightened girl sold to pay a debt. I'm Clara Blackthorne, a woman who chose her life, her love, her battles. I'm free, Jonas, truly free. And that freedom came not from running away, but from standing and fighting for what matters. No regrets. None." She squeezed his fingers. "Though I do wonder sometimes." "What?" "What would have happened if my father hadn't lost that final hand? If Crane hadn't set his sights on me? Would we have ever met?" Jonas was quiet for a moment, then pulled her close. "I believe we would have different circumstances, maybe, but somehow, some way, we'd have found each other. Some things are meant to be." They sat in comfortable silence, watching clouds drift across the endless sky. Finally, Clara broached the subject they'd both been dancing around for weeks. "The house is very quiet," she said softly. "It is. Might be nice if it were less quiet. In time." Jonas's arm tightened around her. "Children, you mean?" "Would that frighten you after what happened to your family?" "Terrifies me," he admitted. "But then, you terrified me when I first saw you, all that fire and defiance packed into such a small frame. Best terror I ever faced." Clara laughed, the sound carrying across the meadow like bird song. "So, we're in agreement. We'll try for a family, if God wills it." Jonas kissed her temple. "Though any child of yours is bound to be stubborn as a mule."
And any child of yours will likely come out armed and dangerous. God help us all." They laughed together, the sound mingling with the mountain wind. As the sun reached its zenith, Jonas stood, pulling Clara to her feet. "There's one more thing," he said, reaching into his saddlebag. "Been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He pulled out a small wooden box, carved with delicate flowers. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, lay a simple gold ring. "It was my mother's," Jonas explained. "The only thing I saved from the ranch. I know we're already married, but you never had a proper wedding ring." "Never had a proper wedding? Come to that." Clara's eyes misted as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. "Jonas, it's beautiful." "She would have loved you," he said softly. "Would have loved your strength, your spirit. Would have been proud to call you daughter. And I'm proud to wear her ring." Clara admired how the gold caught the sunlight. "To carry a piece of your past into our future." Speaking of the future, Jonas pulled out his Bible, the one that had traveled so many miles with him. "I thought, if you're willing, we could speak our vows again, here, under God's own sky, with just us as witnesses. Make it real in a way that paper in Santa Esperanza never could." Clara's answer was in her kiss, deep and sweet and full of promise. When they parted, both breathing unsteadily, she nodded. They stood facing each other in the mountain meadow, hands clasped, hearts open. Jonas spoke first, his voice strong and clear. "Clara May Donovan Blackthorne, I take you as my wife by choice, not chance. I promise to protect you, provide for you, and cherish you all my days. I promise to be faithful in body and spirit, to share my struggles and my victories, to build a life worthy of your trust. This I swear before God and these mountains." Clara's voice trembled with emotion as she responded, "Jonas Samuel Blackthorne, I take you as my husband by choice, not circumstance. I promise to stand beside you, to be your partner in all things, to share your burdens and multiply your joys. I promise to see always the good man you are, not just the hard man you had to be. This I swear before God and these peaks that sheltered us." They sealed their vows with a kiss that felt like both ending and beginning, completion and promise. When they finally parted, the sun was beginning its descent, painting the world in shades of amber and gold. "We should head back," Jonas said reluctantly. "Don't want to navigate these trails in the dark." "In a moment." Clara tugged him back down to the blanket. "I want to remember this, all of it. The way the light falls across your face, the smell of pine and wildflowers, the feeling that everything, all of it, led to this moment." Jonas pulled her close, and they sat watching the sun sink toward the western peaks. In the distance, their valley waited their home, their life, their future. It wouldn't always be easy. The world had a way of testing even the strongest bonds, but they'd weathered the storms and found something unbreakable on the other side. "Thank you," Clara whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me as more than a debt to be paid, for giving me choices, for becoming the man I could love." "Thank you," Jonas replied. "For seeing me as more than a killer, for believing I could change, for making that change worth fighting for." As they rode home through the gathering dusk, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them here, sold like property. She'd found freedom, seeking to save her from one fate. Jonas had saved himself from another. Together, they'd built something worth defending, a love born of choice rather than compulsion, strengthened by trials, sanctified by commitment. The cabin came into view. Windows glowing with lamplight, Jonas had installed glass panes to replace those shot out months ago. Smoke rose from the chimney, straight and true in the still air. It looked like what it was, a home where two hearts had learned to beat as one. "Jonas," Clara said as they dismounted. "Yes?" "I love our life." He smiled,
that rare, transformative expression that she treasured. "So do I, Mrs. Blackthorne, so do I." They tended the horses together, another ritual of partnership, then walked hand in hand into their home. The Bible lay open on the table where they'd left it that morning. Turn to Ecclesiastes, 2 are better than 1, because they have a good return for their labor if either of them falls down. One can help the other up. Clara thought of all the ways they'd helped each other up from despair, from violence, from the prisons of their pasts. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. There would be harsh winters and dry summers, sickness and health, joy and sorrow. But tonight, in their mountain sanctuary, they were simply Jonas and Clara Blackthorne, proof that love could bloom in the unlikeliest ground, that choice could triumph over circumstance, that two broken people could create something whole and beautiful and true. The moon rose over Eagle's Peak, full and bright, blessing their valley with silver light. And in the cabin built by a reformed gunslinger, his chosen bride lit candles against the darkness, their glow a beacon of hope in a sometimes harsh world, a testament to the power of love, redemption, and the courage to choose a different path. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Wild West. If you're enjoying these stories of love and redemption in the American frontier, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories like this one. If this tale touched your heart, please like the video and hit that hype button to help more people discover these narratives of courage and love in the Old West. Until next time, partners.